Hello and welcome to another episode of the Visual VC. This podcast is your go-to resource for practical advice and insights on building, growing, and securing funding for your startup. And today I'm excited to have Yehu Tsur. Yehu is an entrepreneur, investor, and versatile leader with extensive experience in the Asian markets. He currently resides in Singapore after living in China for 13 years. I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to learn from him about what we should know about entering into the Asian markets and how to raise capital from your startup from Asian investors. Yehu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Daniel. Very happy to be here.
Great. So, Yehu, tell us a little bit about yourself and what is the experience of living and doing business in China and Singapore?
Well, very, very different, I would say. So I spent over between 12 and 13 years in China, between Beijing and Shanghai, working mainly with Chinese companies, Chinese investors, Chinese funds. In recent years, living in Singapore and working more on a global Asia, I would say Southeast Asian network. Singapore as a hub to all of Southeast Asia, from Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, and so on, and also a bit of Australia. I would say two very different regions if you're doing business in Asia as a whole and China and individually. Very, very different markets. Probably, I assume you have specific questions. We can go into every bit of it, and I'll be happy to answer it all.
What have you been doing in China, like on a high level?
So I started my China journey working for a Chinese company doing government projects utilizing foreign technology and foreign finance in order to, I would say, source the best technology from the world. So I started working there in 2011. This was far before China became the technology superpower it is today. So you could say back then it was still they were learning from the rest of the world. Some say learning, some say copying, some say cooperating, and so on. But they've come a long way from back then to where they are today. It's probably leading the world in anything that has to do with e-commerce, mobile, TMT, and so on. So I started working for a Chinese company for the first 5 years. Later made a lot of relationships on the government level and the financial level, and started working on my own, bringing different technologies into China in the form of strategic partnerships and acquisitions. Later, I became a broker of some investment and M&A deals, and then I started my own fund with another partner. So we have a co-GP, so a co-manager on a Chinese side, which is private equity, under one of the larger banks in China. And we provide a solution for their investors to invest in foreign technologies.
Mm-hmm.
So with that said, a lot of these technologies that we invested are Israeli startups, obviously, since I'm Israeli, a couple European, and a couple Chinese.
Interesting, very interesting to get. You actually did the whole round from being working in China, then up to raising finance and bringing a startup to the country. As an entrepreneur, that starting in a startup, have some sort of software that's ready to go. What would be the first steps to move and start and get into the Chinese market?
So I would say, first of all, like any startup, you need to have a product market fit, right? So if you find that product market fit in your own market, and you see, I would say nowadays, at least for any startup globally, especially in Israel, they look at two separate markets. If you're looking to target the US market, then you need your product market fit to fit the US consumer, or if it's a B2B enterprise and so on. Whereas if you want to do it for China, it's a very different market. The Chinese consumer, the Chinese enterprise is very, very different than the US or the European or any other Western entity. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is that a lot of companies think if I use this and this strategy or this product market fit in the US, I can also copy paste it to China, and it doesn't work that way. So it's a very unique market in its own. So you have to really kind of understand, and the first form of understanding is the hardest part. So I would say you would need people who understand the markets, or people that at least have lived there or have done business there in the past, to really understand what would be the first point of penetration into this market.
Mhm.
But
So it's like starting up a new business completely, because if the
completely,
market fit is
completely.
right in the US and then or in Israel or anywhere else, you need to get again. And what are the forms? Let's see. I figure out that I want to get into the market, and what would be the investment that I need in order to get into the market, and what is structure. Well, what would be the first steps after you decide, okay, I know I'm going to go through that process. I need to go and find a product market fit. What would be the steps to actually do it?
So that's a very good question. I think there are a few different angles you could take. One of the main angles I think a lot of companies take is going through the embassies, the consulates, the chambers of commerce, which I think is one step, but it's only one of many that should be taken to kind of understand the landscape. The second part is I would probably look in my own network or region of people who do this business or have done it with other companies. So probably go to the entrepreneur network or funds and so on that work with or know it, either it's advisors or companies or consultants, private or otherwise, that work in your market or in other markets that are linked to China. And the third part is within that same trajectory, is trying to find a strategic investor who sees the value in your product, and is willing to help you with money and market penetration. I mean, that would be ideal, but obviously that's the hardest one.
Mhm. So you really not need to go with a partner to
You
get.
have to go with a partner. If you go alone, the road might be a bit more fruitful for you, but actually it's not. I think a lot of companies that go alone learn everything the hard way, and the hard way means it costs you a lot of money. So, like you said, I would say a business to be erected in China, it's its own market individually. Therefore, it needs its own team. It needs its own budget. It's a standalone. That's how I would approach it.
Mhm.
The other part is you could look for someone in China to help you, but with that, there is also an issue that if you hire local Chinese, it's not someone who speaks your language or your culture, so to speak. And also, you will not know 100% what's going on the ground. So you want someone who understands you and speaks your own language to be on the ground. And nowadays, it's a lot harder to find. So again, I would have to go through your own network and kind of find somebody who knows how things work.
Mhm. Can you give me an example of a company managed to succeed in China?
There aren't many, to be honest.
Hmm.
I think a lot of companies tell stories, but to have real success, I think you don't hear of a lot of them. I think to a certain extent, Mobileye has done it quite well, but they also, I think the story of Mobileye, and not saying it because I worked for them or anything like that, just knowing from what I've heard in the market, is that even they had the kind of the touch and go about hiring a local team and understanding why there's problems there, and then finding the right Israeli guy there to kind of take them to the next level. And then they went on, and there's some really, really strong presence there, thanks to the Israeli guys in China that understand China. Another company I would say is, off the top of my head, just in my portfolio, we invested in a company that does drones, who not only have partnered initially with a strong player in China, but also that helped them set up their entire manufacturing and assembly in China, which I think is was a very smart play, um, and also through strategic investment. So that's another company. Um, that's all I have for you at the moment. I actually
Mm.
don't have anything else on the top of my head.
So it seems to me that getting into China is a journey that that's very is hard to get in, and you need to have probably lots of money in investment, and you need somebody on the ground. Um, but it seems that if you want to manufacturing, that's the right place to go. If you're not only doing software, right?
Yes and no. I think nowadays a lot of the manufacturing is moving away from China, mainly because of
Mm.
political and trade and economical reasons. Specifically, recent political issues and waves and monetary restrictions. So, in regards to manufacturing, I would consider China, but I would also look at Southeast Asia as in Malaysia, as in Vietnam, as in Myanmar, and so on. I think Apple did it quite well, where they started their whole manufacturing in China. But I think in the last 3 or 4 years, they slowly moved all of their manufacturing, or
Mhm.
not all of it, but a lot of it from Foxconn to Malaysia and Vietnam mainly, because of the socioeconomic forces in China at the moment.
Mm. So let's segue to investment in China, or I'm talking investment, let's say in the two regions, South East Asia and China. From your perspective, because you have the experience, what I'm let's say I'm a startup. First of all, which and I need some funding. Uh, would you recommend me to come to the chain to the Asian markets to find the finance, and at what stage is it going to be? Seed, pre-seed, round A? Um, what would you say on that?
It's a good question. I would say China would be something that is more in the forms of a ready product. It's not an angel investor market. Also, because the market is bigger, and I would say the requirements our investors are a lot stronger. Whereas if you take Singapore for example, there's a lot more angel funds here. Also, there's a lot of government support here. So if you are actually interested in Asia as a market, setting up in Singapore makes sense. There's a lot of government grants and a lot of benefits, and Singapore is the hub for all of the other Asian countries. So legally, financially, and so on, it's a lot more straightforward and clear, and it's very similar, I would say, to the States. Um, and but also, it's not. I wouldn't. It might be also easier for investment from China currently, where China is. So to your
Mm.
question, if you're looking, if you're starting a company and you're looking at Asia as a whole as your go-to market, I would definitely think of Singapore as your hub. There's a lot of VCs here. There's a lot of money here. There's a lot of money flowing into Singapore from Hong Kong and mainland China because of the current political situation. So
Mm.
there's a ton of money and there's a huge need for good tech. So Singapore as a hub, as much as it says that it wants to draw in the best minds and the best technology, it's not there yet. So I think there's a huge opportunity right now for good startups and good founders.
Wow, great. So Singapore. So take me through as a founder. I want to get my money. I want to get money. I want to raise funds for my A round. What would be the process?
So I think you would do it. I mean, at least this is what I have done, or I would do. I would try to just go online and map out Singapore as a market, and do your whole chart in regards to the angel founds, pre-seed, round days, and so on. See who are the bigger investors, who are the smaller investors. There's a lot of funds here like B Capital, which was started by Edward Saverin, ex Facebook and so on. There's like Golden Gate Ventures here. There's a lot of US based VCs here that are bigger. There's also a ton of family offices that look for interesting tech, but they also are not very tech savvy, which is a pro and a con. So I would really map out the market and then start knocking on doors. So one thing I think is a big plus for living in Asia, as opposed to example in Israel, I don't know how easy it would be for you or for me, even if we were in the tech sector, to knock on, the CEO of JVP or the CEO of Fortissimo or the CEO of FIMI or these huge, huge funds or any other, or Pitango or whatever. Whereas here, you could probably, because I'm a foreigner and you're a foreigner, it would be easier for me to approach you and say, "Hey, blah blah blah, I'm doing this and this. Let's have a beer,"
Hmm.
and you'll have a beer. So that's also a big plus here.
What about agents or investment bankers that can do the work for you, or is it popular there?
It's popular, but it costs money. So
Of course.
I would say I personally like to keep startups very lean. I think advisory and brokers are good. I think if you have the credentials, you should get paid for your work. I would try to go alone first and do the groundwork, do the research, knock on the doors, and if I can't get any feedback, then my next would be going to brokers or to and my so my next up would be brokers, and the next part after that would be bankers.
Hmm. Interesting. And so you're saying that it's not a big deal to go and start mapping your market, looking into the investment market in Singapore specifically, and then once you're in, just approach them, uh, knock on the doors. That's a great advice because, as you said, uh, it's harder to do this in a bigger like in the US and Israel. Um,
Correct. The other
um,
thing, by the way, is there's here and in China, there's a very large Jewish community, which, if you live in the States, it means something totally different. But I think in Asia, specifically I would say in Shanghai and Beijing, and also and especially Singapore, there's a lot of tech people, not just Israelis, but Jews from all over the world that work in, this and that companies, and most people help. So, for example, there's a lot, Singapore is a place where you can't just come and be,
mhm,
right? If you can go to China and you can be an English, well, you used to be able to be an English teacher or a student and you can stay and stick around and find your way. In order to get to Singapore, you need to be sponsored by a company. That meaning that the people are here already sponsored by companies. So a lot of the people who are here, who I would say in their 40s and up, are probably working in some serious companies, and there's a huge community here of Jewish people from Israel, from the States, from Canada, from South America that are bankers that are work for Google, Facebook, Meta, work for Grab, for all these different large unicorns, and they will be happy to help.
mhm.
Most of them are no one. I've never encountered anyone here who says no, thank you. You know, pass, go fish. Everybody is doors open, and that's a beautiful thing.
That's nice to know. What are the unique challenges and opportunities that the investment can give me in that region?
Um, Another good question, my friend. I would
Always.
say, I would say, again, Singapore is a hub to the rest of Southeast Asia. I wouldn't say it's a hub for China, so to speak, but you have markets here. For example, Indonesia, right, is a huge, huge untapped market by a lot of companies. A ton of companies don't know how to enter Indonesia. And for Israelis in specifics, a lot of Indonesian companies won't work with you because you're Israeli. But once you have a Singapore entity, that means you're a Singapore company. That market is open for you. So that's number one. Malaysia as well, same. Two very large markets with a lot of money. So Singapore kind of opens the door to all that. And also, if you want to do business in the smaller regions of Vietnam and Philippines and Thailand and so on, then Singapore is your hub, because here, at least legally and financially, you're secure. Vietnam has a lot of trouble. Companies have trouble getting money out of Vietnam. So different regulation, whereas Singapore is more, it's familiar ground for companies. So it's easier to get the money, to spend the money, to keep the money, to move the money, and so on and so on.
So it sounds like a safe harbor for your company to kind of to land and
Yeah,
expand in a Southeast
correct.
Asia. Mhm.
Exactly.
Let's talk about your fund that you're running. Tell me a little bit about that, and what kind of investment you're willing to do, or which kind of companies you search for.
Sure. So the fund that we raised was actually, it's quite a sad story, because we raised the fund in 2016, and we started actively investing in 2017. So in 2016, we raised a fund from two LPs, two investors. We had a 5-year plan of three funds, 50 million, 100 million, and 300 million USD. We started investing the first fund in 2017. And in 2017, end of December, the Chinese regulator basically stopped allowing money to flow out of China, which meant for us that the money that we got out of the country, and we wanted to invest in two stages. So we got half out. We wanted to finish 25 million and then get the other half out and continue investing the second half. But with the regulator, we only got one half out, meaning the rest of the money that we raised had to go back to investors, because at that time it became illegal to get RMB out of China. So we invested only 25 million USD in 9 companies. Two of those 9 companies are Chinese companies, and the rest of the 7 are based either between Israel and Europe. We are what's called a typical Chinese fund, meaning we are sector agnostic. We look for things that our LPs at the time really wanted to or were interested in. Therefore, we have companies they're mainly hard tech. We don't have any software. So we have, medical device with augmented reality. We have satellite communication. We have food tech. We have drones. We have robotics. We have artificial intelligence. Media company. So it's really, really across the range,
Across the
and really
board.
depending what. Yep, it's really across the wall there. With that said, the two Chinese companies we invested already IPO'd. Again, very different markets. And the rest of the companies amongst the last 7, I think about 1 failed and 6 are still going strong. Some stronger than others, obviously, but most of the companies are still doing quite well.
Are you still accepting investments?
At the moment, we are not. So the fund is closed at the moment until we can probably exit all our positions, return to our investor his initial investment, and then with the profit, there is discussion about a second fund, specifically now because it's a lot easier to get money out. So still not easy, but just easier. That we might raise another fund, maybe end of 2024.
Good luck with that. I really hope you can see more exits coming very soon. What would be the things that you should avoid when you are looking for funding in Singapore?
So I think in Singapore, the investors are a lot more professional, in the sense of Israel market and Singapore would have similar expectations, where fund life, what the board should be doing with the company, how much help, what is a strategic investor, what is a financial investor, what kind of responsibilities each one has to the other. And I'm comparing this to China, okay? And in China, there's also very good investors. There's also very bad investors. Same in Singapore, same as American as well. I mean, I'm sure you've seen as well as I have, large American investors coming in and destroying the company, which happens as well. So I think you should really be as picky as you are about picking a life partner. You should be about bringing an investor in, because once you bring an investor in, that's it. You're stuck. There's no divorce there, right? So and you know this better than
Yeah.
me. You've run your company for 10 years, so you know very well how how it stings if you pick the wrong person. I also think there's a pro and a con for having someone so far away in different time zone. So if you have someone who's based in Asia, um, I would do my due diligence on the person or on the company. I would check their portfolio to see who they've invested in, and try to talk to those founders to understand what you're getting yourself into. Because you know as well as I do, there's no such thing as a free lunch, and there's no free money. There are some amazing investors I've worked with, and I've worked with some investors they're just horrible. So with that said, one of the pitches that we gave to the companies that we invested in was, you deal with me. You don't have to deal with my Chinese investor. You don't have to deal with my Chinese co-GP. You don't have to deal with anyone from my staff. You deal only with me. I speak your language. That's the added value. Otherwise, I can tell you, Daniel, for sure, we wouldn't have been able to get into some of these companies, which is a good thing. It means that they're very picky, which is great. So I would really do my homework in regards to any investor for that matter, Israeli, American, or otherwise, or Chinese, and kind of try to understand if they don't have any kind of if it's a first time investor, and these are actually quite a lot of family offices here in Singapore that are first time investors. The due diligence you do is go meet them. Don't be lazy. Don't be cheap about getting on a plane. Get on a plane or ask them to get on a plane. Meet them more than once. Really kind of build the relationship to understand what we're getting yourself into.
So yes, you actually need to build a relationship. You don't close a round over Zoom. So that's really really good advice.
I wouldn't. Yeah, that's dangerous.
That's very dangerous. Even though during 2021, 22, there were lots of deals closed over Zoom. Obviously, COVID one of the reasons for that. But apparently now you see the markets are going down, and that's something like, okay, this is a completely different story. Yeah, give me some. We coming to the end, and your advice and information you gave is amazing. Can you give me some fun fact about yourself and a recommendation for a book or a podcast that you listen or you want to share with the audience?
So this is the book is actually quite uncharacteristic of myself. But I've been reading it because I've heard good things about it, and I honestly wanted to kind of how to say, match my own experience. So there's a book written by a couple of Navy SEALs called Extreme Ownership, which is, it's a leadership book or a business book, call it whatever you want. And I very rarely read these kinds of books. But since we all serve and we all do whatever we do in the military, I wanted to kind of take whatever key learnings these guys had from their time spent in Afghanistan and this and how they take that and they coach business leaders, and to kind of, when I read it and I think about what I would do, and then you get that kind of feedback if you're right or wrong. I actually really enjoyed that. So I think on that aspect, I
What's the
enjoyed
name
the
of the
book.
book?
Extreme
Extreme
Ownership.
Ownership. Check it out.
Yeah.
And give me some a fun fact about yourself. I mean, you've got so much experience to living in China, in Singapore. What's it like? What is the
So, I mean, I would say I love traveling, so I've traveled all over China. Also to places where a lot of my Chinese friends have never been. Like third tier cities, you think you're in the 1930s that have probably never seen a 2 meter white man in their life, which was quite interesting. I speak fluent Chinese, so it's easier for me to travel around and do and you know and just go and explore. I love all kinds of sports and outdoor activities and extreme. So I've been cycling around a few different different provinces from Shanghai to Anhui to Zhejiang province, road biking, which is very
Wow.
dangerous but also very fun. Um, so yeah, that's just something that's fun to do. My family is all over the world, so we also like to get together once or twice a year and explore different places, especially places that neither of us live. So if I live in Asia, my brother lives in Europe, and my folks are in Israel, we'll try to pick a country that we've never been and none of us have lived, which is a little harder, but we try to do some homework and then travel together every year.
Wow, sounds like fun. Being in different places in the world, meeting the family, that's a journey. There you have it, valuable insights and advice from Yehu Tsur. I hope you found this interview informative and helpful in your own journey to startup success. Remember to keep watching for more episodes of this series and subscribe to the channel for more valuable tips on how to build, grow, and raise funding to your startup. And if you find it valuable, share with your friends. And again, a big thank you, Yehu Tsur, for taking the time and sharing your knowledge. Until next time, keep working hard and remember, it's not always about the destination, it's about the journey. Thank you for watching.